Yeah, James, I don't necessarily think that to be a music critic, you have to be in music, but you need
No.
to have a realistic understanding of yourself. And also, it helps to learn about the field. Like, I think that's why I like Chris Stuckman so much, because he is actively learning and taking part in filmmaking. So when he talks about films, you can tell it comes from from a place of passion.
I extraordinarily disagree with the idea that you have to be in a field to criticize it, because then everyone would be a hypocrite. Like, you don't like I haven't liked every album I've ever heard, every music or every fucking movie I've ever watched, every video game I've ever played. I can't do any of those things myself. That doesn't make me like them anymore. Like, that's a I like that if somebody in a field says, like, pulls that shit, I'm always going to look down on them a little bit. Like, it feels somewhat common in like professional wrestling, like when wrestlers talk down to fans when they don't like something that happens. I'm like, and like they're like, oh well, you're not in the business, so you don't have a place to say anything. Great, I still didn't like that. I didn't like that match. I didn't like that angle. Like, me being a wrestler may make me see it from a different perspective, but it doesn't make it any more my cup of tea.
Chris Stuckman, James. Let me write it. Let me write it out.
Duck, man.
Chris actually, he did a video that was part of the inspiration for me finally coming out. It wasn't the same story for him. He was talking about his experiences in the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Oh my.
He was raised Jehovah's Witness.
I imagine that'd be tough on a trans person.
He's not trans.
Oh, my bad. LGBTQ, whatever.
Yeah, he did come out at the end as pansexual though.
Right.
But it was just him making the video because, like, in the Jehovah's Witnesses, you only talk to other Jehovah's Witnesses. Anyone outside is like persona non grata. Like, you only talk to them to indoctrinate them into Jehovah's Witness. And if you rub the people in charge of the witnesses the wrong way, you get ostracized so hard. And it sounds like, from his stories, it sounds like being in the witnesses is super alienating, especially when you leave the religion, because they do not talk to you ever again. And especially if you speak out against the witnesses, by making that video, he's effectively, like, he's probably never going to hear from his family ever again, at least his dad.
Sheesh.
But he did it anyway because it was the right thing to do. And that part was the inspiring thing to me, because one, it made me realize that my parents are, like, I am incredibly lucky that my parents are who they are, because they are Christian, but they're not super conservative. They're relatively progressive, like very modern Christians. And I feel like I can actually talk to them about things. So it made me feel less worried about coming out. Yeah, my mom also said when we were talking to him, yeah, that's the same thing that happens in Mormonism.
I remember when you said that you'd like officially come out to your parents, and the conversation went well. I wanted to just start a call with you, scream yeah, and then leave. I just wanted to express that because I was so fucking happy for you.
Awesome Animation said, I just realized the girl you talk about in Self-Portrait with a Stolen Painting is you. Well, here's the thing about World Builder. I wrote that before I'd accepted to myself that I was trans, but I sort of, like, I left it open. The character in the album is a girl. I wanted it to be about a girl because, like, you could change the genders, you could change the pronouns, and the story would be the same. So I thought this should be about a girl. And just by doing that, but also like using my own voice and presenting male at the time, that would add subtext to it. That, like, maybe this girl is trans, and that adds more subtext when you learn about, like, she's been abused, she's gone through an awful relationship, and that's part of why she's closed herself off and escaped to another world. And then that's one of those things where, like, you put in the subtext because you don't realize it's your own subtext.
Mm-hmm.
Like, last year, no, 2 years ago or so, I came out on Facebook to my family as pansexual. And at the bottom, I put in a little line that also I'm sort of unsure about my gender. At minimum, I feel like I want to present more feminine than I do, which is one of those wishy-washy things where as soon as you put it, you know why you put it there and that you're clearly lying about something.
Mhm.
It was the same time when my parents like sat me down before they had me baptized and saying, "You do actually believe all of this, right?" And I said yes, and I immediately knew I was lying.
How old were you?
13, 14.
Ah, yeah, that's old enough to know you're lying.
Yeah. I guess this is the part where I talk about, like, I give my coming out story. Well, let's continue then.
Yeah.
So I know a lot of people in the chat here. Let me actually put something in this blue space. We'll stick with this. But I know a lot of people watching have been following us for a long time. If you've been around long enough, since like 2011, when episode 11 came out of SFA, I came out in the podcast as a bisexual transvestite. And that evolved very quickly to pansexual and gender fluid. Like transvestism is a very old, pretty outdated idea. I think some people still identify as it, but to me, I thought, okay, maybe I'm a transvestite. You know, like Eddie Izzard. I was a fan of Eddie's for a while. Well, guess what? Eddie is actually transgender. So about that, Thorn. But as time went on, I identified as gender fluid the longest. Like under the trans umbrella, gender fluid lasted a long time. A couple years ago, or maybe just last year, I started feeling like that wasn't accurate anymore. And on Twitter, I came out as non-binary instead. Because we have a few non-binary friends, like Jacob and Yoshi's respective partners, our friend Chez. So I thought, okay, maybe it's that. The funny thing about the Philosophy Tube coming out video that we played at the start of this stream, for those who don't know, it's Identity, a trans coming out story. Look it up on YouTube. In it, the man who isn't there, quote unquote, to Abigail Thorn, like it's an actor playing Abigail Thorn before she came out, like how she used to look, the short hair, the beard. She's talking about a book by Audre Lorde, who was a poet and a communist lesbian in like the 50s and 60s. Audre Lorde is talking about recognizing other things in other people, the ways that other people add to your add to who you are as a person. What Audre Lorde realized wasn't that the people were changing her. It was actually recognition that she was feeling, like she was seeing in other people. That's how she actually felt. And all of our non-binary friends, maybe, like, I was feeling some of the recognition there. It wasn't quite accurate, but that I was sort of feeling that. So for a while, I identified as non-binary. That only lasted a few months before I realized that's not quite it either. And eventually, I had to accept myself. I think I'm actually transgender. And part of it is also like Jacob and I's mutual friend, Lils. For a while, she identified as genderqueer. But sometime after, she came out as trans woman. And non-binary, gender fluid, genderqueer, etc. All of those are not stepping stones to being trans. They are their own valid things on their own. But our respective experiences was sort of like trying on different coats to see which ones actually fit, and it took a while to find the ones that did. This was October, I think. It was before the election, so I think it would have been October. I had a really rough 2 days. I think it was literally Saturday and Sunday, so just a bad weekend. I feel like I need to put up a warning here. I'm going to quickly put up some text. And for as long as that is up, if anyone is at all does not want to hear about potentially triggering subjects, for as long as this is up, I'm talking about something quite upsetting. So if you don't want to hear this, please mute now. I'll give you 10 seconds to do so. Okay. In high school, Apropos of nothing, I promised myself I would never commit suicide. I just promised myself that. I felt like however my life goes, whatever happens, I'm going to ride the whole thing out. I'm not going to end it myself at any point. And I had never had that challenged. Anyway, I've never felt like I need to rethink that. July 4th, 2020, my grandma, who had lived with us for a long time and had early stage dementia for a long time, and she couldn't walk anymore very well. She usually needed to use a walker or a cane. She had fallen a few times. It had never been super bad, but on July 4th, at like around midnight, she fell and hit her head on the table. And it was the worst fall she'd ever had. And it was the first time that, like, without question, we sent her to the hospital. We didn't even think about it. And this was the middle of COVID, so that was a rough time. Like, it was early in COVID. And we sort of had the thought that, like, eventually she would come back home, but actually very quickly, because of the trauma she experienced, her early stage dementia jumped ahead to advanced Alzheimer's. And unfortunately, July 4th was the last time I ever saw her because she was always in a home after that point. And like her personality completely changed. She went from being a very nice, very warm person to like yelling at the workers, being slightly racist when she never was before. Like there was a Jamaican worker that was helping her for a while, and she said, "You shouldn't have never married my son." And her only son is gay, for one thing. So she just sort of disappeared. And then I think in September, we got the call that she had passed away. So she went downhill extremely quickly. And like me and her, we lived together. We weren't super close, but that experience changed something for me. And when October came around, the election was coming up. You know, COVID had been raging forever. It was always getting worse, and it still is, frankly. And in my mind, I just knew America was going to drop the ball again. Trump was going to get reelected. And I felt so hopeless. I felt like, and for the first time, I genuinely reconsidered to myself whether I would commit suicide or not. I began to act like it finally became an option for me. And part of that was also because I was finally starting to accept, I think I might actually be transgender. I had said I was gender fluid, non-binary, and part of that, I think, subconsciously was, those are things that you can hide behind if I needed to. I could pass as male, like what people expected, and nobody would notice anything. Like the only long-term relationship I'd ever been in that anyone had ever seen me with was another person, was me identifying as a man with a girlfriend. So I could pretend all this time to be socially acceptable and I would never have to deal with any problems. No, I'm a trans woman and I feel like I'm never going to be able to come out. The only thing I thought I could ever do was like move to a completely other city and only start hormones there and then like tell people over Facebook 3 years later. I could just hide. And so for 2 days, I was considering, again, this is like when I was on Facebook when I said, I feel like I'm questioning my gender. It's that wishy-washy thing where when you say it the wishy-washy way, you know you're leaving some information out. I was considering suicide. There's just no way to hide behind that in a way that isn't a lie. This is where it gets funny, though. So, like, Sunday night, I'd been awake for 2 hours, just in a cold shake, because considering suicide is rough. For anyone who hasn't done it, I don't recommend it for a number of reasons, but I distinctly remember lying there thinking about, okay, if I'm going to commit suicide, how am I going to do it? Maybe I'll take a knife and I'll slit my wrists, classic way. I don't like being cut. I don't like the pain of knives. Hey, I'm not going to kill myself. I don't want to hurt myself. And just like that, I was over it. Immediately, like, I felt like a cold rush of relief knowing that because I'm a cowardly ass, I'm not going to commit. I'm not going to kill myself. And it was so nice. And it was at that point where I thought, okay, well, if I'm going to keep on living, should I keep myself feeling worthless like this and hopeless? Maybe I need to actually like start following through on something. And it took a couple months, but when January finally came around, it was like I couldn't fight it anymore. I told Yoshi and Jacob first, guys, I think I need to face the idea that I'm a trans woman. Again, wishy-washy thing, leaving out the information. What I meant to say is, guys, I'm trans. But like that was midnight of the 13th of January. That same night I told the guys on Twitter, I changed my bio. I changed the text name to Michaela. And I left that overnight because I knew as soon as I press save on the profile, there's no going back from this. So I slept on it in the morning. I knew I had to do it. I saved it. And that was the 13th where I came out to everyone on the internet. That night, when my parents were asleep, I still live with them. We have a whiteboard on the fridge where we leave notes or we leave groceries that we need to get. I wrote, I need to talk with you guys when mom gets home from work. I got a big closet I need to come out of. And I could not sleep that entire night because I didn't know what was going to happen. That morning, my dad had some people over to fix the furnace, and I was terrified that they had read it. They didn't say anything, but I just holed up in my room for like 5 hours, needing to pee because I didn't want to deal with anyone except my parents. But thankfully, like my dad said, like, we love you, we'll support you no matter what, even before he knew what the closet was. So that helped a lot. And then we talked when mom came home. They had ordered some Mexican food, and we were sort of on a time limit before the food got there because I knew I wouldn't be able to eat with my nerves shot the way they were. I gave them the whole spiel. I talked about some of the videos I'd seen. I talked about Chris Stuckman and his sort of what he'd gone through with Jehovah's Witnesses, and like how speaking out against them means he's never going to hear from his family again, but he did it anyway because it was the right thing to do. And that bravery I found inspiring. I also talked about Philosophy Tube, and Abigail coming out as trans 2 weeks after I did felt like something in my life coming full circle, because her videos, like she has a Black Star trilogy, quote unquote, where the first one was back when she was presenting as male. She talked about her history of self-harm and suicide attempts. The second video is her talking about her history being in an abusive relationship and how her then presenting as male, how if men don't tell those stories, if men who are expected to take abuse and just live with it, if they don't tell their stories, then when other people need to learn how did other people get through that stuff, they can't because they don't have those stories. And that in particular, like with Chris Stuckman, his bravery, that signals something to me. Again, going back to Audre Lorde and the recognition, seeing the recognition in something else and that clicking in the mind. That made me think of another video where it's a video by Matt Baum, came out semi-recently, where he was talking about how the 70s were the most exciting time to come out as gay. Like, there's a rough specter in hindsight of how the 80s would bring the AIDS crisis. But in the 70s, it was an exciting time because it felt like things were changing rapidly. And you can feel that right now with being trans. It's rough. Like, in a lot of places, being trans is going to make your life so much harder. But the more people, like in the 70s, when he was talking about Harvey Milk, the first gay man to be elected to public office, Harvey gave a speech where he said, everyone who's gay needs to come out. That made me think about, maybe I should come out as trans, because the more people who come out, the more visible we are, the more people who have prejudices and have believed lies about us, the more they see us how we really are, the more that our own families and friends actually see the real us. People who have known us a long time before we came out, if we come out as trans and we're still the same people, those lies and prejudices are seen for the lies that they are. So I can stay in the closet all my life, or I can come out and, again, going back to my life philosophy, be a net positive. So all of that was sort of like my mind telling myself, like, just fucking do it. And I realized as more stuff from Philosophy Tube, where she had talked a lot about Rene Descartes. Rene Descartes, he was a French philosopher who tried to doubt everything he thought he knew until he found one thing he couldn't doubt anymore. And that one thing would be certain knowledge. And what he found was that he couldn't doubt that he was thinking. Like, he could doubt this table is not here, other people aren't really there, but I can't doubt that I'm thinking, because doubting is a type of thinking. So maybe I don't have a body, maybe I'm not human, maybe I'm something else, but I cannot doubt that I have a mind. I think, therefore I am. And I realized, me starting as maybe I'm a transvestite, maybe I'm gender fluid, maybe I'm non-binary, I had been kind of doing the same thing for the entirety of the last decade, of just peeling layers of my identity away until I found the one undeniable truth. That one undoubtable thing. And that one undoubtable thing I finally landed on at some point at the end of last year was that I hate looking at myself in the mirror. I hate seeing this boy. I don't think I'm that. I wish I was a woman. That I could not doubt anymore. And so finally, January 13th, January 14th, came out of the closet. It went so much better than I could have hoped for. It, like, in a way that's almost disconnecting in my mind, because I'm still not quite used to it. I'm still not used to, like, my parents call me Miki. I asked them to call me their daughter, call me Michaela or Miki. My friends still call me it. Like, when you guys use she, her pronouns for me, it's like, before I came out, when I was, like, just in those last few months, when I was still sort of dicey about coming out, and like you would say he or him, I would get this small sinking feeling. And now when you guys use she, her, I feel a little brightness. And I think it's because I'm so used to hearing horror stories. Like another series of videos, Pink Blue by Jesse Nowak, aka Nowacking, another semi-former abridger. Like, he's a voice actor, he's an editor. He's probably best known on the internet for a lot of abridging stuff. He went through some really rough shit. He came out as a trans man a couple years ago, a year or two ago. And his journey has been tough, but, like, his life only got better. There's this really lovely video that he made recapping the 100 weeks that he'd been on testosterone. And I think I had expected more suffering. That's sort of the funny thing. It's impressive how much the Philosophy Tube identity video just connects so much with what I was going through. Because, yeah, people expect and kind of want to hear more about the suffering. They don't want to hear about the joy. It doesn't matter what happened before. It doesn't, like, the minutia is not really important. The important thing to know about being trans is that when you can be yourself, you feel happy. You feel content. This is right. It's nice to know that I haven't had, I know I'm lucky. I'm lucky in way too many ways, in ways that I'm self-conscious about. I have pretty good health. The only real allergies I have are, like, seasonal. I had asthma as a kid, but I grew out of that. I don't have asthma anymore. I had one asthma problem a while ago, and it was just exacerbated by seasonal allergies. Like, I don't have food allergies. My eyesight's failing, but that's just because I'm on the computer all the time. That's my own fault. But, like, I could still see fine. Other things, I've had it really good. I almost feel like I should be suffering more, but it's nice to know that I didn't have to. And now I'm only, like, I think, like, I'm talking with someone I live in California. That's another positive thing, being trans. There's a lot more of a support system in California. And in Sacramento, the community center has an LGBT plus support center within it. And I've been talking with people that are helping me get my legal name and gender changed. Hopefully that's done like just in this next week. And again, looking at the support that I've gotten, it's a lot. And I haven't started hormones yet. I'm looking forward to that. The most interesting thing, this is another story. I've never cried since 4th grade. And I don't exactly know why. Jesse Nowak, he was talking about when he started testosterone, he stopped being able to cry. Like he can cry on command, he tears up, but active weeping is just something you can't do anymore. And I thought maybe that's a testosterone thing. But also in 4th grade, I had a really traumatic experience being bullied by by another kid, and I broke down on my mom, and it was a whole thing. And I don't think I've cried since then. So I think it's a trauma thing. So I'm interested to see how estrogen is like, what estrogen is going to do to me. Will crying be a problem? We'll find out, but I don't know where else to go from there. If anything, coming out as trans has been wonderful. And part of that is all of the support. I can't thank you all enough just for being so kind and welcoming. I've seen like 1 or 2 stupid things within a sea of positivity, and it's great. I think that's it.
I could not stop smiling listening to most of that story. I just want to say, I'm so fucking happy for you.
Yeah. I mean, I went through like 8 different facial expressions when you mentioned thinking about suicide because I had no fucking idea.
I didn't tell anyone.
I didn't want to interrupt your story, but the way you got over it felt so on brand.
Right? It was...
Wait, that might hurt.
I don't want to do that.
That's stupid.
Well, I've mentioned this offhand. I'm a person who's perfectly willing to just dip out because I'm very, I don't know if antisocial is the right word, but I have a lot of social anxiety. And I think part of that was just getting so locked into the internet that I haven't had a lot of social interaction. Also, just because everyone I've met in person in my life has tended to be some level of asshole, so I just avoid people. So like whenever anything happens that would give me a reason to not do something, I would take it. And it's nice that happened in a good way. Oh yeah, that reminds me. The Mexican food arrived like 5 minutes before I was done.
Oh. You heard the knock on the door and you're like, hold on!
Oh, okay.
No,
it's my only delivery today, so I don't mind.
I do want to add you stating that coming out is the right thing due to like an acceptance thing, and I agree to that, especially since, I mean, you're not famous. You are someone who does have a following of some sort, though. Statistically, there are going to be some people who hear your story, know that you're trans, who don't have a lot of experience around trans people, but are open-minded enough to learn. And it is very possible you may be somebody's first experience, like knowing, quote unquote, somebody who's transgender, and then if they're the right person, they're going to look into that. They're going to learn more about the trans community and trans people, and they are in turn going to spread the idea, the normalcy that of being transgender, and that itself is why you're absolutely doing the right thing by coming out.
And even just if you don't have a following, like we're extremely niche.
Or just someone in your life, yeah.
Yeah, other people in your life who may not have experience, you're going to be that experience for them.
Yeah, I'm personally fortunate. My parents are like center left, like they were registered Democrats. Like they weren't perfect. You know, my dad is 61. My mom would have been 59 now. But they, like, if they did have any like wishy-washy views, they at the least recognized it enough to make sure that I did not feel the same way. I did not grow up in a household that I would call like homophobic or transphobic or anything, and I think that helped a lot when it comes to learning more about the LGBTQ community. I myself am pansexual. So like, but not everybody is that fortunate. They may be taught different and that can hamper them, but like hearing exposure is the greatest cure for that. Seeing somebody who you know to some extent, whether they're a friend, a family member, or even a celebrity you look up to some extent, seeing them come out, there's going to be a lot of people who look at that, think, and spread acceptance in their own way.
That's another thing. A few people in the chat, some of whom are trans themselves, say like everyone's, like all of them had different points in their lives when they realized. Some of them knew something was up but didn't have the vocabulary. Teddy, I think he knew when he was like 13, 14.
Around there, yeah.
In a way, we want to think that he's lucky because he was able to act on it long before us. But also, like, most of my life, I didn't think I was trans. And I didn't necessarily feel that I was trans. It was something that sort of evolved over time. Like, that's sort of, it's another thing that, like, links up perfectly with Abby's video talking about, you ever have a crappy job? And it just wears on you over time.
Several.
Yeah. So like that's the thing, like a lot of people know what it's like to be trans. They're just not trans themselves, so people can connect with it. You just need to tell the story in a way that they understand. But my original point is everyone realizes at a different point, and we want to feel like the people who realize early are the lucky ones, but it's just everyone's different experiences. Everyone is living a different story, and every story is going to change at different points. Some of the changes are going to be more traumatic and more, like, have more widespread consequences than others, but they're all changes that you're going to experience in your life. Having them later than other people can have its downsides. Like, I'm lucky in that I actually have a pretty feminine frame, so like puberty was actually very kind to me. When I go on estrogen, I don't imagine I'm going to look too different, but I'm still going to look more feminine, but I already look pretty feminine already. But there are also people who are trans who have a lot more dysphoria about their bodies than I do, who would have rather that, like, they had hormone blockers and puberty blockers when they were kids, so that once they were sure they could take estrogen or testosterone and actually affect their bodies in the way that they would prefer, and they don't have that option anymore. But even still, it's all just life experiences. And I think we need to stop thinking of being trans as a life of struggle, because that puts the narrative in that, oh, you hate your body? Well, you're kind of stuck with it no matter what you do. And all that does is add more dysphoria when you see stories like Abby, where she just says, am I a man? Am I a woman? I'm happy. That's more what people need to hear.
Well, my philosophy in life has always been, fuck everyone else. I'm going to do what makes me happy. Like, that's what it's genuinely has always been for me. And sure, part of that was growing up as a teenager and being like, I'm edgy, but as I get older and older, I realized how good of a mentality that actually was, because I have several friends who are gender fluid or non-binary, or there's some part of the LGBTQ plus, and every one of them have a completely different story, but the bottom line is that they always just wanted to be happy. Not game show happy, they just wanted to be comfortable, just, fucking being alive.
That's a good phrase.
Yeah, not like, because I know people they kind of confuse what being happy, like, when people say I want to be happy, they don't mean every single second of their life. It's normal to have several emotions, and it's normal to cry, and it's normal to have all these things. Funnily enough, these are lessons that I learned from One Piece, but that's another story. But for the majority of my life...
Sorry, I didn't mean to cackle at that.
No, it's funny. Go for it. For the majority of my life, that's pretty much how I was raised. Um, sure, like parts of my family are very Christian, but eventually one of my cousins came out as gay, and they were weird about it at first, but they still accepted it. And I feel that regardless of how you live your life or what your background is or what your current situation is, as long as you do whatever you can to make yourself happy, life's too short. Life is too short to worry about other people you don't care about. I'm not saying never feel bad or never cry or never be upset when somebody says something that annoys you. And I'm aware that, there are lots of kids that they can't just escape their households. But I always implore everyone, every chance you get to be yourself or to just live your life, I want that for everybody. Everybody should have the right to feel however the hell they want, whatever the fuck makes them happy. And no one else gets to tell you how to live your life. It might sound stupid, but there is a reason why I identify a lot with the stretchy pirate with the fucking straw hat. It's because his whole story is all about just wanting to have the most freedom possible. And you can apply that to literally anything. Some people feel free just coming out. Some people are just happier being elsewhere with their friends. And that's just how I feel it should be for everyone.
Agreed. I'm one of those people who like this is a bit too like existential, but I'm one of those people who doesn't think life has a greater meaning. My goal in life is to have as much fun as I can because I love having fun. Controversial take, but I do. So that's another part of it. Like being who you are means you get to have more fun, and that's cool. That's my addition to this conversation.
Positive hedonism.
Yeah.
Non-harmful hedonism.
Of course.
Actually, I think I remember another reason why I connected so much with Jesse Nowak's 100 Weeks on T videos, because he talked about how he used to wonder why people would take selfies, like, why you take pictures of yourself? Why do you want to see yourself? And part of that is recognizing that you in some way don't want to see yourself. Because me, I didn't like seeing myself in the mirror. And you might, like, if you saw our Boston vlogs, I would always be the cameraman, and I would never film myself. I didn't like being on camera because I didn't like seeing myself. I think the only times I was when I was in a dress. So there we go. But now, like the day or so after I came out to everyone, I put on that Wednesday Addams dress. I had bought a bunch of, I pretty much had all that makeup already. Put on lipstick, eyeliner, that kind of glittery purple eyeshadow, and took a picture of myself. And it was probably the most genuine smile that I've had in a picture in years. I haven't had many other pictures that I've posted just because like my beard grows really quickly. And also, honestly, those and the striped maxi dress that I'm wearing today and that I posted today. Those are most of the clothes I actually want to wear. A lot of the others aren't really. I don't really have a look for them, quote unquote. But like, I like seeing myself now. I want to take pictures and have people see me now.
That's the next struggle. Feminine outfits are harder to put together than masculine ones.
Yeah. That's just why I wear long dresses. It's like the dress looks good, my makeup looks good. Maybe I have like leggings or stockings or whatever, but you're not really going to see that because the sink's in the way. But so anyway, in all of that, we passed $2,500.
Yay!
Hey, look at that. Even though I've always said that I'll never be able to fully relate to somebody who's coming out or non-binary or trans men or trans women. I'll never be able to relate because I'm comfortable with who I am, and being male, but at the same time, I know what it's like to be judged just by being a different color or nationality. So for me, I see it as the same thing, where you should just be accepting of everyone regardless of where they come from or regardless of how they present themselves.
You say you can't fully relate. Maybe no, you can't, but people who aren't trans can relate to being trans more than they think. Because like we were talking about, if they ever have a crappy job, well,
Yeah.
For trans people, it's kind of like what your own body is like.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure.
And a lot of people have had terrible jobs.
The job comparison honestly was spot on, especially since I'm constantly working and I've been screwed left and right from practically every job I've been in. But
yeah, I've got the striped maxi dress, and under it I'm wearing some black disco pants.
Disco pants?
They're basically leggings, but like they're shiny and they have seams along the sides and pockets on the back, but they're super tiny and shallow. Okay, so what do we do next?
I guess it's time for the Midnight Frogs podcast.